What did your parents teach you as a kid that was actually messed up? Story 1. Anytime I felt hurt by a conflict with a friend, my parents would tell me to never talk to them again because they aren't real friends anyway. I ghosted all of my best friends thinking it was the right thing to do. Now, I know that real friends talk things out and it makes the friendships even stronger. A very painful realization. I never even considered my parents could have been wrong. Story 2. How to lie or avoid situations where truthful responses would get me in trouble. Anytime I spoke up about anything really, I'd be ridiculed and put down by my mother, so I stopped talking. If I told her something good happened at school, she'd ask why I was still getting such bad grades. So I decided to just stop talking. Story 3. My dad always told me work will set you free. Do your chores, work will set you free. Do your homework because work will set you free. This went on for about a decade until I came back from history class at school and asked him why it was on the entrance to Auschwitz. Story 4. You have better balance, so you, the 10-year-old, should climb up on the roof and clean the gutters and sweep the chimney. Also climb up to the top of the flagpole at the REC and fix the rope stuck in the pulley. And install new gutters, but I was 13 by then. Another one is, if someone gets in a fight with one of your older brothers, find a brick and hit them in the back of the head. Actually, I knew that was a bit messed up back then. Story 5. My mom taught me that when you have bug bites, you should scratch them until they bleed, and then rub salt on them to make them stop itching. It wasn't until I was 23 and passed that home remedy on to a friend and they immediately told me how masochistic it was, that I realized something was weird about it. Story 6. My grandparents were morticians. I remember sitting on an embalming table, swinging my legs back and forth off the table while watching my grandfather embalm someone and talk to me about what he was doing. I was 7. It's honestly a great memory, and the many times I had with him like that taught me a lot about how to deal with death, how life is cherished, how different grief can be from person to person, and how to be emotionally strong for others. Good guy, just was very desensitized to his work's more macabre parts. Story 7. My father told me that crying and expressing sorrow was a trait of the weak and underlings. I've spent the majority of my life soaking in and bottling up emotions and would have random outbursts in the form of fights and smashing things. It wouldn't take till about 2 years ago, I was in a bromance with somebody when I found out the hard way when my dog passed. I buried her myself and acted like it was nothing in front of him. He saw right through me. I was a ticking bomb ready to explode. I remember we both sat in the tall grass and he told me that the ball of stress in my chest and the tension in my face didn't make me less of a man. He told me crying makes you human. I remember after he said that, I dang well melted into the grass. Story 8. When I was maybe 7 years old, my mom was dating this guy who would apparently smoke a lot of grass. Not that I ever saw him smoke or the substance itself. At some point I did smell it though, and I asked about it. He told me that he just took a dump. So growing up, I used to associate the smell of pot with poop until I got older. Story 9. My parents told me that I had a limited number of words and when I got to that limit I would pass away. I guess it was an easy way to make me shut up. Story 10. Definitely not as bad as a lot of these other ones, and I know it wasn't done on purpose to be malicious, but to eat when I was sad or upset. It's easier and faster to tell a kid to go eat something as a distraction than it is to sit down and deal with it, especially if said kid is upset a lot due to living in abusive environments, getting bullied at school, etc. It definitely really messed up my relationship with food, leading to emotional eating, overweight turning into obesity, even more bullying, disordered eating and other mental health issues. I realized probably 15 years ago that this was an issue and the cause of it, but even though I know that, it's still something I'm working on unlearning. Story 11. I always had anxiety as a child and my mother said the only way to get over it is to deal with the situation head on. Sounds great until I told her my fear of escalators and she pushed me down and I fell and almost got my hair caught. Another thing she loved to teach me is how self-defense is necessary. Great. Where do I take lessons? There were no lessons. She said being with my abusive ex was enough of a lesson. I should have learned then. Story 12. My dad instilled crippling perfectionism in me, which I realized was insane when I got older and people told me to just do my best. When I was in grade school, I would come to my dad with A's all super excited. But if it was anything less than a 100%, he would ask for the missing percentage. So when I had a 98%, he'd say, well, where's the 2%? And now, if I do anything less than perfect, I beat myself up. Story 13. After arguing with a girlfriend and not speaking with her for a few days, both my parents told me separately to hold on to my beef with her like a grudge and use it against her later. I've been married to the girlfriend now 25 years this year, never once took my parents' advice, and have no idea how my parents' marriage survived. Story 14. They made me distrust my own intelligence. They talked down to me and treated me like an airhead, giving me a smirk every time I tried to be serious about anything. It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that I am intelligent and gained self-confidence despite the negative self-esteem they had instilled in me. Story 15. That it's okay if my stuff goes missing because dad probably took it because you shouldn't leave stuff out and his medication makes him forget where he left the stuff he took. Having his stuff left out meant visible in any way, even in my own room. Growing up, my things would always disappear and I'd always eventually find it among his things, sometimes even years later. I'm sure my older brother was the culprit sometimes, as he was known to be a klepto but never got past my dad doing it. I turned 16, and the day of my birthday my wallet, full of birthday money including a check from my grandma and my expensive pocket knife went missing out of my car. They were in my work clothes I had just changed out of. Found my wallet empty and my knife in his office in a desk drawer. I moved out that day. Against his wishes, but my mom helped me. If you've gotten this far and enjoying the content, please leave a comment of your own story. We'd love to make a video of them in the future. Story 16. My dad was teaching me about credit cards and said you can just make the minimum payment every month. It blew my mind, made it seem like free money. Thank God I didn't take that advice. I pay my credit card off every month and is drowning in credit card debt. Story 17. They said foster parents were all pedophiles who abused and pimped the kids they took in. My stepdad would tell us this whenever we got bruises from him hitting us to discourage us from calling social services or telling a teacher. As I grew up, it turned out okay. Met some people who foster in my adult years and they're the nicest, kindest people ever. My stepdad left my mom for a Chinese mail order wife, and my mom remarried to a truck driver who is the best dad a guy could have. Story 18. The only reason people are nice is to get something from you. I'm 21 now and never had a close friend. Every relationship I've ever had has been superficial. My parents hated having other kids over because then someone was getting free childcare out of them. We weren't allowed to hang out with other kids outside of school because surely those kids were trying to lure us in to be molested by their family members. I'm so lonely, but I've missed out on those important years and I feel like that ship has sailed. My parents are paranoid loons and I've been getting better since I realized that, but man am I messed up. They still remind me that someone is waiting behind every tree. I didn't realize how bad it was until my boyfriend was at my parents' house one day and pointed out to me how bizarre it was that they full on panic when someone rang the doorbell. Story 19. My dad told me he could drink beer in the car if he drank it while the car was stopped. It's only drinking and driving if the car is in motion. I was like, that makes sense. I was around 4. Story 20. My mom told me that on some buildings there weren't guard dogs but rather guard birds. These birds were trained to peck your eyes out if you trespassed. I believed this till I was 16 and have been afraid of birds ever since. Story 21. During a car ride my dad once explained to me the concept of micromurder. It was the idea that the seconds spent in traffic behind someone driving below the speed limit and other instances of people inconveniencing you were seconds of your life that you couldn't get back and should be upset about. I realize as an adult that he's got some issues and just needed an excuse to resent random people on the street. Story 22. I remember my sisters and I all getting a talk about how when women dress provocatively, it's her own fault if she were to get abused. Men can't help themselves, which is why my family had such a strict dress code. When we bought new clothes, we would have to go show my dad and he would make us walk around, sit, stand, and then decide if it was appropriate or not. It really didn't settle in just how gross that whole thing was until I got older. Story 23. Whenever we went to a yard sale, my parents would say that they were going to Jew them down on price. I literally had no idea until I was an adult that they were saying Jew. I thought it was some other word like Jew. I could not even imagine that this was a racist statement or what it actually meant as a child. As an adult, I finally realized and was so shocked. Story 24. That you are at least partially to blame for anything bad that happens to you. Get beat up by a bully. It's at least partly your fault and you're to be blamed and punished for it. Get bit by a dog. It's at least partly your fault and you're to be blamed and punished for it. Accidentally step on a nail, cut yourself, fall, have an asthma attack. It's partly your fault and you're to be blamed and punished for it. A few years ago, my younger brother, we are in our 30s now, was out in the town at night and got mugged. I had to drive him to the hospital. I started blaming him for it and had to pause and ask myself what the heck was I thinking, and right there and then had an epiphany that the way we were raised was totally screwed up. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to Thread Talk for more content like this. Also, don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out. Have a dope day and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers!